The morning sun cast long shadows across the rocky surface of planet Kithara as alien ships descended from the purple sky. Each vessel was different, built by civilizations that had mastered space travel for thousands of years. The largest ship belonged to the Gorvani, a race of four-armed giants who stood nearly 10 feet tall. Their ship was black metal, covered in spikes and weapons. Next to it landed the crystal ship of the Zirathi, a race of living rock creatures who communicated through light patterns. The Zephyrite arrived in a swarm of small flying craft, their insect-like bodies buzzing with excitement. Among all these impressive alien vessels, one small human ship looked almost pitiful. The Wanderer was built from steel and basic alloys. Nothing fancy or advanced. It had scratches on its hull and patches where repairs had been made during long space journeys. The ship landed with a soft thud, raising a small cloud of red dust. Captain Jake Morrison stepped out of the Wanderer and stretched his arms. He was 35 years old, with brown hair and a face that showed he had seen many worlds. His uniform was simple blue fabric, not the advanced materials the aliens wore. Behind him came Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez, a woman with black hair tied back in a practical ponytail. She carried a backpack filled with tools and samples from their journey. Tom Bradley, their chief engineer, was the last to exit. He was a thin man with steady hands and eyes that missed nothing when it came to how things worked. The three humans walked toward the registration area where beings from 12 different worlds were signing up for the Galactic Endurance Challenge. The air buzzed with alien languages, translated by small devices that each species wore. Jake could hear the deep growls of the Gorvani, the musical tones of the Luminari, and the clicking sounds of the Zephyrite. At the center of the gathering area stood the reason they were all here. The Crimson Cliff rose 3,000 feet straight, up into the sky like a red wall of death. The rock face was dark red, almost black in some places, and it seemed to go on forever. Ancient marks on the stone showed where other climbers had tried and failed. Some said the cliff was cursed. Others claimed it was simply impossible to climb. Jake looked up at the massive wall of rock and felt a familiar excitement in his chest. This was why he loved being human. Where others saw an impossible challenge, he saw a puzzle waiting to be solved. "Look at this place," Amy said, her voice filled with wonder. She was already studying the plants that grew around the base of the cliff. "The ecosystem here is amazing. These vines have adapted to grow in almost pure rock." Tom was examining the cliff face with his engineer's eye. "The rock looks unstable in places. See how it changes color? That usually means different hardness levels. Some parts will crumble if you put too much weight on them." The humans were so focused on studying the cliff that they didn't notice the alien competitors gathering around them until a massive shadow fell across their group. Jake looked up to see HFY War, the Gorvani champion. The alien warrior was covered in thick, gray skin that looked like armor. His forearms were each as thick as a tree trunk, and his small red eyes glowed with amusement. "So these are the humans I have heard about," HFY War said, his voice like grinding stone. The translation device made his words understandable, but they still carried a mocking tone. "You look so soft and weak. Do you really think you can climb the Crimson Cliff with such pathetic bodies?" Other aliens began to gather around, drawn by the conversation. A Zirathi warrior, its crystalline body reflecting the morning light, spoke with a sound like breaking glass. "Humans are barely past the Stone Age in terms of technology. They still use metal tools and chemical rockets. How can such primitive beings hope to succeed where advanced civilizations have failed?" A Zephyrite buzzed closer, its wings creating a high-pitched humming sound. "They don't even have proper climbing adaptations. No extra limbs, no natural hooks, no ability to fly. They are completely unsuited for this challenge." Jake felt his teammates tense beside him, but he remained calm. He had dealt with alien prejudice before during humanity's first contact with the galactic community. Most species saw humans as newcomers who didn't belong among the stars. "We may be new to space travel," Jake said evenly, "but humans have been climbing mountains for thousands of years. We've learned a few things about working with rock. This comment made several aliens laugh. The sound was strange, different for each species. The Govani made a rumbling noise deep in their chests. The Luminari, beings of pure energy, flickered, with what seemed like amusement. The hegemony soldiers, who looked like humans but with blue skin and enhanced muscles, smiled with superiority. "Working with rock?" scoffed a hegemony officer. "We have anti-gravity harnesses, molecular adhesion, gloves, and personal force fields." "What do you have, ropes and hooks?" "Something like that," Jake replied, still studying the cliff face. He was beginning to form an idea, but he needed to see more. The registration officer, a floating sphere covered in sensors, announced that all competitors should register now. One by one, the alien team stepped forward to record their species, their technology, and their strategy for climbing the cliff. The Gorvani registered their brute force approach, planning to use their forearms and incredible strength to power up the cliff face. The Zephyrites would use their natural flying ability and sharp hooks to navigate the dangerous overhangs. The Luminari could phase through solid matter when the climbing became too difficult. The Zerathi had developed special crystal spikes that could anchor into any type of rock. Each species had spent centuries developing their approach to the cliff. They had the best equipment, the most advanced technology, and natural abilities that seemed perfect for climbing. Their confidence was clear as they discussed their strategies and mocked the competition. When the humans stepped forward to register, the laughter grew louder. The registration sphere scanned them with its sensors and seemed confused by the readings. Species, human, technology level, basic, natural climbing adaptations, none detected. Special equipment, standard rope and metal tools. Strategy, unknown, unknown. The HFY roared with laughter. "They don't even have a plan." "This will be over quickly." But Jake was still studying the cliff, and his mind was working on the problem. He watched how the morning light hit the rock face, how the wind patterns moved around the massive stone wall, and most importantly, how the native plants had adapted to survive in this harsh environment. Amy was collecting samples of the vines that grew wild around the cliff base. Tom was making notes about the rock composition and the way water had carved channels in the stone over thousands of years. The three humans worked together, sharing information and ideas in a way that seemed strange to the individualistic alien competitors. As the day wore on and the formal challenge ceremony began, Jake felt more confident about his developing plan. The aliens had superior technology and natural advantages, but they were all thinking about the problem in the same way. They wanted to fight the mountain to overcome it with force and advanced tools. Jake was beginning to think there might be a different way. A human way. Image description for Leonardo AI. A massive red cliff face rising 3,000 feet into a purple alien sky, with various alien spacecraft landed at its base, including a large black spiked ship, a crystalline vessel, and small flying craft. In the foreground, a simple human spaceship called Wanderer with scratches and patches sits among the more advanced alien vessels. Three humans in simple blue uniforms stand looking up at the imposing cliff while towering four-armed gray aliens, crystalline rock beings, and insect-like creatures with wings gather around them in a mocking circle. The scene shows red rocky ground with hardy vines growing at the base of the cliff under an alien sun casting long shadows. The first rays of dawn painted the crimson cliff in shades of blood and gold as the challenge officially began. A horn sounded across the rocky plain, its deep note echoing off the massive stone wall. 12 different species had gathered at the base of the cliff, each confident in their ability to conquer what many considered impossible. The Gorvani, champion the HFY, was the first to move. His four massive arms swung into action as he grabbed handholds that would have been impossible for smaller beings to reach. His thick, armor-like skin protected him from the sharp edges of the rock. Each movement was powerful and deliberate, sending small stones tumbling down as he powered his way upward. The other Gorvani cheered from below, their deep voices rumbling like thunder. The Zephyrites launched themselves into the air with a buzzing sound that filled the morning. Their insect-like bodies moved with grace as they used their natural wings to fly between handholds, Sharp hooks at the end of their limbs dug into the rock face, allowing them to rest on tiny ledges that other species couldn't use. They moved in a coordinated swarm, helping each other find the best routes up the cliff. The Luminari approached the challenge differently. Being creatures of pure energy, they could phase through solid matter when the climbing became too difficult. Their glowing forms flickered in and out of the rock face, appearing and disappearing as they moved upward. When they encountered an impossible overhang, they simply phased through it and continued climbing on the other side. The Zerathi warriors activated their crystal spikes, advanced technology that could anchor into any type of rock. The spikes glowed with inner light as they bit deep into the stone, creating perfect handholds where none existed before. The crystalline beings moved with mechanical precision, each step calculated and perfect. The hegemony soldiers deployed their anti-gravity harnesses, floating slightly above the rock face as they climbed. Their enhanced muscles and blue skin glistened in the morning light as they used molecular adhesion gloves to stick to even the smoothest surfaces. Personal force fields protected them from falling rocks and sharp edges. Each species had brought their best technology and natural abilities to the challenge. The cliff face quickly became crowded with climbers using every advantage their civilizations had developed over thousands of years. The alien observers at the base of the cliff watched with confidence, certain that their champions would succeed where so many others had failed. Jake Morrison stood at the base of the cliff, but he was not looking up at the other climbers. Instead, he was studying the vines that grew wild around the rocky base. These plants had adapted to survive in one of the harshest environments on the planet. Their roots dug deep into cracks in the stone, and their stems were incredibly strong and flexible. Amy Rodriguez knelt beside him, her hands gently examining the vine structure. These plants are amazing, Jake. Look at how they've adapted to the cliff environment. The stems are hollow but incredibly strong, like natural rope. And see how they follow the stress patterns in the rock? They only grow where the stone is most stable. Tom Bradley was making notes in his electronic pad. Sketching the patterns, he observed. "The vines don't fight the mountain," he said quietly. "They work with it. They follow the natural lines of strength in the rock face. That's smart engineering." While the aliens deployed their advanced technology to fight the mountain, Jake saw something different. The vines had been climbing this cliff for thousands of years, and they had learned its secrets. They grew in specific patterns that followed the safest routes up the massive stone wall. Where the rock was weak, no vines grew. Where the stone was strong and stable, the vines flourished. "What are you thinking?" Amy asked, seeing the expression on Jake's face. "I'm thinking that maybe we don't need to fight the mountain," Jake replied. "Maybe we need to learn from it." The first day of climbing brought mixed results for the alien competitors. The Gorvani made impressive progress, their raw strength carrying them higher than many expected. The HFY was already 300 feet up the cliff face, his four arms working in perfect coordination as he grabbed handholds and pulled himself upward. The Zephyrites had reached even higher, their ability to fly giving them a significant advantage. They buzzed around the cliff face like angry insects, finding routes that ground-bound climbers couldn't use. Their sharp hooks allowed them to rest on ledges barely wide enough for their small bodies. The Luminari moved steadily upward, phasing through difficult sections when necessary. Their energy forms left glowing trails on the rock face, marking the routes they had taken. Other climbers watched these trails with envy, knowing they couldn't follow the same paths. But as the day wore on, problems began to appear. The Gorvani champion reached a section where the rock looked solid but was actually weak and crumbly. When the HFY put his full weight on what seemed like a perfect handhold, the stone gave way. Chunks of rock tumbled down the cliff face as the massive warrior fell 20 feet before catching himself on a lower ledge. His roar of pain and anger echoed across the rocky plain. The Zephyrites encountered their own difficulties when the wind patterns around the cliff changed. What had been gentle breezes in the morning became violent gusts that slammed the flying insects against the rock face. Their delicate wings were not designed for such abuse, and several climbers were forced to retreat to lower levels to avoid injury. The Luminari discovered that their energy forms were affected by the electromagnetic fields generated by certain minerals in the rock. In some sections of the cliff, they found themselves unable to phase through the stone, trapped in solid matter until they could find a way around the obstacle. Even the advanced Xerathi technology began to fail. Their crystal spikes, designed to anchor into any type of rock, encountered stone that was too hard for them to penetrate. The spikes shattered against the ancient rock, leaving the crystalline warriors without their most important tool. As the sun reached its highest point, Jake finally began his own ascent. But instead of rushing up the cliff face like the others, he moved slowly and carefully. He carried with him several coils of rope made from processed plant fibers, basic equipment that looked primitive compared to the alien technology. The alien observers watched with amusement as Jake began his climb. "Look at the human," one hegemony officer said with a laugh. "He's using actual rope." How primitive. But Jake was not trying to compete with the aliens in terms of speed or technology. He was following a different strategy entirely. He studied each handhold carefully before trusting it with his weight. He tested every grip twice before moving forward. Most importantly, he was following the patterns he had observed in the vine growth, using the roots that the plants had shown him were safe. Amy and Tom provided support from the ground, using radio communication to share information about weather patterns and rock stability. They worked as a team, something that seemed strange to the individualistic alien competitors who relied on their personal abilities and technology. "Jake, there's a weather system moving in from the east," Amy's voice crackled through the radio. "The wind patterns are going to shift in about an hour." "Copy that," Jake replied, adjusting his route to take advantage of sheltered areas on the cliff face. "I'm seeing some interesting vine patterns up here. They seem to avoid certain sections entirely." Tom was studying the cliff face through binoculars, making notes about the rock composition and the way water had carved channels in the stone over thousands of years. "The vines are avoiding the areas where water runs during storms. That rock is probably unstable from constant erosion." As the afternoon wore on, more alien climbers began to encounter serious problems. The Gorvani found their brute strength useless against rock that simply crumbled under their weight. The Zephyrite were grounded by increasingly violent wind patterns. The Luminari discovered more and more sections where their phasing abilities failed them. The advanced alien technology, designed for controlled environments and predictable challenges, was proving inadequate against the unpredictable nature of the Crimson Cliff. The mountain seemed to have a mind of its own, testing each climber in ways they had never experienced before. But Jake continued his slow, methodical climb, following the wisdom of the vines and working with the mountain instead of against it. His progress was steady if not spectacular, and he was beginning to understand the cliff's secrets in ways that the aliens, with all their advanced technology, could not. As the sun began to set on the first day, painting the cliff face in shades of red and gold, Jake looked up at the massive stone wall above him and felt a growing confidence. The mountain was not his enemy. It was a puzzle waiting to be solved, and he was beginning to understand the solution. Image description for Leonardo AI. A dramatic view of the massive red cliff face during the first day of climbing, showing various alien beings at different heights on the rock wall. 4 armed gray giants grip handholds with massive strength, while insect-like creatures with wings buzz around higher ledges. Glowing energy beings phase in and out of the rock face, leaving light trails. Blue-skinned humanoids float with anti-gravity equipment. At the bottom, the second day brought darker clouds and stronger winds to the Crimson Cliff. Many alien competitors had retreated to their base camps during the night, nursing injuries and damaged equipment. The cliff face looked different in the gray morning light, more dangerous and forbidding than before. What had seemed like a challenging climb the day before now appeared almost impossible. The mighty Gorvani champion sat in his camp examining his injured hands. The rock had cut through his thick skin in several places, something that rarely happened to his species. His massive form was bent over as he applied healing salve to the wounds. Around him, other Gorvani warriors discussed whether to continue the challenge or withdraw from the competition entirely. The Zephyrites had fared even worse. Several of their climbers sat with damaged wings, the delicate flying membranes torn by the violent winds and sharp rock edges. Their buzzing conversations were filled with concern and doubt. They had never encountered conditions so harsh that their natural adaptations failed them so completely. The Luminari, energy beings, flickered weakly as they gathered around their crystalline communication device. The electromagnetic interference from the cliff's mineral composition was draining their energy faster than they could recharge. Some of them had become so weak that they could barely maintain physical form, let alone continue climbing. Even the advanced hegemony forces were struggling. Their anti-gravity harnesses had malfunctioned during the night, damaged by the strange energy fields that surrounded the cliff. Without their technological advantages, the blue-skinned warriors found themselves no better equipped than ordinary climbers. While the alien competitors dealt with their failures and injuries, Jake Morrison worked through the night at the base of the cliff. He had not tried to climb higher after the first day. Instead, he had spent the evening studying the vine patterns more carefully and developing his plan. Amy Rodriguez worked beside him, her hands skillfully weaving together strands of the native vines. She had studied the plant structure for hours, learning how the natural fibers were strongest when twisted together in specific patterns. The vines had evolved to be flexible yet incredibly strong, able to bend without breaking under the stress of wind and weather. "These plants are amazing," Amy said as she worked. "Look at how the fibers are arranged. They're hollow in the center, but reinforced along the edges. It's like nature designed them to be rope." Tom Bradley was busy creating a simple pulley system using parts salvaged from their ship. His engineering background helped him understand how to distribute weight and create mechanical advantage using basic tools. The system was not pretty or high-tech, but it was functional and reliable. "The key is redundancy," Tom explained as he attached metal rings to form the pulley system. "If one part fails, there are backup systems." The aliens relied too much on single points of failure with their advanced technology. Jake studied the cliff face through his binoculars, mapping the vine patterns and identifying the safest routes. He had discovered that the vines grew in distinct paths that followed the natural stress patterns in the rock. Where the stone was weak or unstable, no vines grew. Where the rock was solid and reliable, the vines flourished in thick clusters. "It's like they're showing us the way," Jake said, pointing to a section of cliff where vines grew in a clear zigzag pattern. "They've been climbing this mountain for thousands of years. They know its secrets." The alien observers watched the human activity with growing confusion. They could not understand why the humans would spend valuable time working with primitive plant materials when advanced climbing technology was available. The Zirithi scientists studied the human behavior through their crystal sensors, trying to comprehend the logic behind such a basic approach. "They are weaving plant fibers together," one Zirithi reported to his commander. "This is technology that most species abandoned thousands of years ago. It makes no sense." A hegemony officer shook his blue head in disbelief. "They're going to trust their lives to twisted vines? This is suicide. We should warn them before they kill themselves." But Jake was not planning to simply climb with vine ropes. His strategy was much more sophisticated than the aliens realized. He was creating a rope and pulley system that would work with the cliff's natural features, not against them. The vine ropes would be anchored at multiple points, following the patterns that the plants had shown him were safe. As the sun rose higher, Jake began implementing his plan. He started by climbing to a ledge about 50 feet up the cliff face, following a route where thick vines grew naturally. He tested each handhold carefully, using the knowledge he had gained from studying the plant patterns. Where vines grew thick and healthy, the rock was solid and reliable. Once he reached the ledge, Jake began setting up his rope system. He anchored vine ropes at multiple points, creating a network that distributed weight across the strongest parts of the cliff face. The system was designed to provide safety and support, not to fight the mountain but to work with it. Amy and Tom coordinated from the ground, using radio communication to guide Jake's movements and provide information about weather conditions. They worked as a team, something that seemed strange to the individualistic alien competitors who relied on their personal abilities. "Jake, there's a stress fracture in the rock about 10 feet to your left," Amy reported, studying the cliff face through her binoculars. "The vines are avoiding that entire section." "I see it," Jake replied, adjusting his route to avoid the dangerous area. "The vines are definitely the key to reading this mountain." As Jake worked, the alien competitors began to take notice of his unusual approach. The Gorvani warriors stopped tending their wounds to watch the humans' methodical progress. The Zephyrites buzzed with curious conversation as they observed the rope system taking shape. The Luminari, energy beings, flickered with what might have been interest as they watched Jake create anchor points that followed the natural patterns in the rock. They had never seen such an approach to climbing before. "What is he doing?" asked a hegemony officer, his blue skin reflecting the morning light. "That rope system looks incredibly primitive." "He's following the vine patterns," observed a Zirithi scientist, its crystalline form sparkling as it turned to study Jake's work. "But why? The vines are just plants." "They have no intelligence or purpose." But Jake understood something the aliens did not. The vines had been selected by thousands of years of evolution to survive on the cliff face. They only grew where they could find stable anchor points and safe roots. They were a living map of the mountain's secrets, showing the way to anyone smart enough to read their message. By midday, Jake had established a rope network that extended nearly 200 feet up the cliff face. The vine ropes were strong and flexible, able to bend with the wind without breaking. The anchor points were placed at locations where the vines grew thickest, indicating the most stable rock. The alien observers gathered at the base of the cliff, watching with growing amazement as Jake's simple system proved remarkably effective. His progress was steady and safe even as the weather conditions worsened. The vine ropes adapted to the changing conditions, stretching and flexing without failing. "This is impossible," muttered Thekvoar, his forearms crossed as he watched Jake climb. "How can such primitive methods work where our advanced technology fails?" The Zephyrites buzzed with agitation as they watched Jake navigate sections of the cliff that had defeated their flying abilities. The human's rope system allowed him to traverse areas where the wind was too strong for wings, using the cliff's natural features for protection. Even the Luminari energy beings seemed impressed by Jake's approach. They had never considered working with the mountain's natural systems instead of trying to bypass them with their phasing abilities. As the afternoon wore on, more alien climbers began to abandon their attempts. The Gorvani found their strength useless against rock that crumbled under their weight. The Zephyrites were grounded by winds that grew stronger as the day progressed. The Luminari discovered that their energy was being drained faster than they could replenish it, but Jake continued his methodical ascent, his vine rope system proving remarkably adaptable to the cliff's changing conditions. He moved with confidence and safety, reading the mountain's moods through the wisdom of the plants that had learned its secrets over thousands of years. The human approach was not about conquering the mountain through superior technology or natural advantages. It was about understanding the mountain, learning from it, and working with its natural systems rather than against them. As the sun began to set on the second day, Jake looked up at the massive stone wall above him and felt a growing certainty that his approach was correct. The mountain was not his enemy to be defeated, but a teacher to be understood. And the vines were showing him the way. Image description for Leonardo AI. A nighttime scene at the base of the red cliff showing a human camp with 3 people working by firelight. A man in blue uniform studies the cliff face through binoculars, while a woman with black hair weaves thick green vines into rope using traditional techniques. A thin man assembles a simple pulley system from salvaged metal parts. Around them, the third day dawned with heavy gray clouds that promised storm and danger. The wind howled across the rocky plain, carrying with it the bitter taste of defeat. What had begun as a confident display of galactic superiority was turning into a disaster that none of the alien species had expected. The first to officially withdraw from the challenge were the Luminari energy beings. Their leader, a flickering form of pale blue light, announced their surrender through the translation device. The electromagnetic interference from the cliff's mineral composition had drained their energy reserves to dangerous levels. Several Luminari had already collapsed into barely visible wisps of light, too weak to maintain physical form. "We cannot continue," the Luminari leader said, its voice like distant music. "The mountain draws our life force from us. We have never encountered such a phenomenon before. Our phasing abilities are useless here." The Luminari retreat sent shock waves through the other alien competitors. These beings were among the most advanced in the galaxy, capable of existing as pure energy and passing through solid matter at will. If they could not conquer the Crimson Cliff, what hope did the others have? The Zephyrites were the next to abandon the challenge. Their swarm leader, a large insect with iridescent wings, clicked and buzzed in their native language before the translator made the announcement clear. The violent wind patterns around the cliff had torn the delicate wings of too many climbers. What had seemed like a natural advantage for flying creatures had become a deadly trap. "The air currents are not natural," the swarm leader reported. "The mountain creates wind patterns that change without warning. Our wings cannot adapt fast. Enough to the shifts. We have lost 3 climbers to the violent gusts, and many more are injured." The insect-like beings began packing their equipment with hurried movements, their antennae twitching with nervous energy. They had never encountered winds that could defeat their natural flying abilities. The sight of the Zephyrites retreating in obvious fear made the remaining competitors question their own chances of success. By midday, the mighty Gorvani were forced to admit defeat. Vekvior himself made the announcement, his massive frame showing the wounds and exhaustion of 3 days fighting the mountain. His 4 powerful arms, which had seemed capable of crushing any obstacle, hung limp at his sides. "The mountain fights with tricks and deception," Vekvior growled, his voice filled with frustration and anger. "The rock looks solid but crumbles. Like sand, the handholds appear strong but break under honest weight. This is not a battle for warriors. This is a trap designed by cowards." The other Gorvani warriors nodded in agreement, their gray skin marked with cuts and bruises from falling rocks. They had relied on brute strength for thousands of years, conquering worlds through raw power and determination. The idea that force alone could not solve a problem was foreign to their culture. The hegemony forces followed soon after, their blue-skinned commander admitting that their technological advantages had proven useless. The anti-gravity harnesses continued to malfunction. In the cliff's energy field, the molecular adhesion gloves had lost their effectiveness against the strange rock composition. Personal force fields flickered and failed when they were needed most. "Our equipment was designed for controlled environments," the hegemony commander reported, his enhanced muscles useless without the technology to support them. "This mountain operates by rules we do not understand. Our scientists recommend immediate withdrawal before we lose more personnel." The crystalline Zerathi were the last to admit defeat, their pride in their advanced technology making surrender difficult to accept. Their crystal spikes, designed to anchor into any material in the galaxy, had shattered against the ancient rock of the Crimson Cliff. Without their primary climbing tool, the rock-like beings found themselves unable to progress the mountains. "Composition defies our understanding," the Zerathi leader announced, its crystal form dim with defeat. "Our matter penetration technology fails against stone that appears primitive but contains unknown properties. We cannot explain this failure." One by one, the alien species packed their advanced equipment and prepared to leave Cathara. Ships began lifting off from the rocky plain, carrying the defeated competitors away from the impossible challenge. The galactic media, which had arrived expecting to document another alien triumph, found themselves reporting a mass exodus instead. Through it all, Jake Morrison continued his steady climb up the Crimson Cliff. His vine rope system had now extended nearly 800 feet up the massive stone wall, following the natural patterns that the native plants had shown him. While the aliens retreated with their broken technology and injured pride, the human worked with quiet determination. The alien observers who remained at the base of the cliff watched Jake's progress with growing amazement and confusion. The primitive human was succeeding where the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy had failed completely. His simple rope system, woven from wild vines, proved more effective than anti-gravity technology and molecular adhesion devices. How is this possible? Asked a Zirithi scientist, its crystalline form reflecting the gray light of the cloudy day. His methods are thousands of years behind our technology. Yet he climbs where we cannot. A hegemony officer shook his blue head in disbelief. He's using plant fibers and metal hooks? Equipment that our ancestors abandoned when they developed space travel. It makes no sense. But Jake understood something that the aliens had forgotten in their rush to develop advanced technology. The Crimson Cliff was not just a rock face to be conquered through superior force or clever gadgets. It was a living system that had evolved over millions of years with its own rules and patterns. The native vines had learned these rules through natural selection, growing only where they could survive and thrive. Amy Rodriguez provided constant support from the ground, using her knowledge of botany to guide Jake toward the strongest vine. Growth patterns. Her radio calls helped him avoid areas where the plants warned of unstable rock or dangerous conditions. Jake, there's a thick cluster of vines about 30 feet to your right, Amy reported, studying the cliff face through powerful binoculars. The growth pattern suggests very stable rock in that area. I see it, Jake replied, adjusting his route to follow the natural guidance system. These plants are better than any computer at reading the mountain's structure. Tom Bradley monitored the weather and provided technical support for the rope system. His engineering knowledge helped Jake modify the pulley arrangements to handle changing wind conditions and rock formations. The system grew more sophisticated as it climbed higher, adapting to the cliff's challenges. Weather front moving in from the west, Tom announced. You'll have about 2 hours before the wind picks up again. Jake used the information to time his movements, working with the mountain's natural rhythms instead of fighting against them. He rested when conditions were dangerous and climbed when the mountain allowed safe passage. His approach was patient and methodical, completely different from the rushed attempts of the alien competitors. The galactic media began to focus their attention on the lone human climber as the alien withdrawals continued. News reports spread across the galaxy, telling the impossible story of a primitive species succeeding where advanced civilizations had failed. The coverage was filled with disbelief and confusion. The human continues to climb using methods that should not work, one reporter announced. Experts are baffled by his success with such basic technology. As the day wore on, more alien ships departed from Kithara. The rocky plain that had been crowded with alien technology and confident competitors became empty and quiet. Only a few observers remained, drawn by curiosity to watch the human's impossible climb. Jake reached the 1,000-foot mark as the sun began to set on the third day. His vine rope system stretched below him like a green thread against the red rock, marking a path that no alien technology had been able to follow. The system had adapted and grown during the climb, becoming more sophisticated as Jake learned the mountain's secrets. From his position high on the cliff face, Jake could see the alien ships disappearing into the purple sky. He felt no satisfaction. In their defeat, only a quiet confidence that his approach was correct. The mountain was not an enemy to be conquered, but a teacher to be understood. The vines whispered in the wind around him, sharing secrets that had taken them thousands of years to learn. Jake listened to their wisdom and continued climbing toward the distant summit, following a path that only human ingenuity and patience could discover. Image. Description for Leonardo I. A wide view of the red cliff base showing multiple alien spacecraft lifting off and departing in defeat, with exhaust trails against a stormy gray sky. Various alien groups packed their advanced equipment in frustration: crystalline beings with shattered spikes, four-armed giants with bandaged hands, insect creatures with torn wings, and blue-skinned humanoids with malfunctioning gear. In stark contrast, high up on the cliff face, a small human figure in blue uniform climbs, steadily using a network of green vine ropes that zigzag up the rock face following natural plant growth patterns. At the base, two humans with radio equipment look up supportively while alien observers point in bewilderment at the climbing human. The fourth day brought clear skies and steady winds to the Crimson Cliff. Jake Morrison hung 2,000 feet above the rocky plain, his vine rope system stretching below him like a green lifeline against the red stone. The alien ships had long since departed, carrying their defeated crews to distant worlds where they would struggle to explain their failure to understand such a simple concept as working with nature instead of fighting against it. Only a handful of alien observers remained. At the base of the cliff, their curiosity stronger than their wounded pride. They watched through powerful telescopes as the human continued his impossible climb, using methods that their advanced civilizations had abandoned thousands of years ago. The galactic media had declared Jake's attempt the greatest climbing story in recorded history. Amy Rodriguez sat in the human base camp, her radio headset crackling with Jake's steady voice as he reported his progress. She had become his eyes and ears on the ground, studying the cliff face through binoculars and guiding him toward the safest routes. Her knowledge of plant biology had proven more valuable than any alien technology. "Jake, I'm seeing a beautiful vine cluster about 50 feet above your current position," Amy reported, her voice calm and confident. "The growth pattern suggests very stable rock, and it looks like it might lead to a natural resting ledge." "I see it," Jake replied, his voice clear despite the distance. "These vines never lie about the rock quality. They've been my best guides on this whole climb." Tom Bradley monitored multiple systems from the communication setup he had built from spare parts. His engineering background helped him track weather patterns, wind speeds, and the structural integrity of Jake's rope system. The vine network had grown more sophisticated during the climb, adapting to each new challenge the mountain presented. "Weather looks good for the next 6 hours," Tom announced. "Wind speeds are steady, and there's no sign of storms. Perfect conditions for the final push." Jake paused on a small ledge to examine the cliff face above him. The final 1,000 feet of the Crimson Cliff were the most dangerous, where the rock was oldest and most unstable. Many climbers throughout history had reached this point only to fall when victory seemed within reach. But Jake felt confident in his approach and his understanding of the mountain's secrets. The vine ropes around him swayed gently in the wind, their hollow stems singing a soft melody that seemed to encourage his efforts. These amazing plants had taught him everything he needed to know about reading the cliff's moods and finding the safest paths. Where they grew thick and healthy, the rock was solid. Where they avoided certain areas, danger waited for the unwary. Below him, the remaining alien observers continued their discussions about the impossible human success. HFY, the defeated Gravani champion, had returned to witness the end of Jake's climb. The massive warrior sat in brooding silence, his forearms crossed as he watched the small human figure moving steadily upward. "I still do not understand how this is possible," HFY growled to a Zirathi scientist. "Our strength failed where his weakness succeeds. Our technology broke where his primitive tools function perfectly. What kind of power does this human possess?" The crystalline Zirathi studied Jake's progress through its optical sensors, trying to analyze the climbing technique that had defeated their most advanced equipment. "Perhaps the answer is not in what the human possesses, but in what he understands. He reads the mountain like we read data streams." A hegemony officer who had remained to observe shook his blue head in amazement. "Look at that rope system. It's completely adaptive. It changes and grows as he climbs higher. Our rigid technology could never match such flexibility." Jake began the final ascent as the sun reached its highest point in the purple sky. His movements were smooth and confident, each grip tested carefully before he trusted it with his full weight. The vine ropes provided safety and support, but more importantly, they showed him the way through the maze of unstable rock that guarded the summit. The cliff face became more treacherous as he climbed higher, with loose stones and crumbling edges that would have defeated climbers relying on brute force or inflexible technology. But Jake followed the wisdom of the vines, avoiding the weak areas and finding the hidden paths that led safely upward. "The vines are getting thicker as I go higher," Jake reported to his team. "It's like they're celebrating the approach to the summit. They know this mountain better than any computer ever could." Amy tracked his progress with growing excitement. "You're only 300 feet from the top, Jake. The vine patterns show a clear route all the way to the summit ridge. You're actually going to make it." Tom monitored the rope system's performance, amazed by how well the simple vine network had adapted to the changing conditions during the climb. "The system is holding perfectly. Those vines are stronger than any synthetic material we could have brought. Nature really did design the perfect climbing rope." As Jake approached the final 100 feet, the alien observers gathered around their telescopes and communication devices. Word of the humans' impending success had spread across the galaxy, and beings from hundreds of worlds watched the live broadcasts in disbelief. A primitive species was about to accomplish what no advanced civilization had achieved in over 2 centuries. The last section of the climb required all of Jake's skill and patience. The rock was ancient and fragile, worn smooth by millions of years of wind and weather. But the vines had found their way even here, growing in careful patterns that marked the only safe path to the summit. Jake moved like a dancer, flowing from one handhold to the next with the grace that came from understanding, rather than fighting the mountain. His vine rope swayed in the wind below him, a testament to the power of working with natural systems instead of trying to dominate them with technology. 50 feet, Amy called out, her voice filled with emotion. "You're 50 feet from making history, Jake." The summit of the Crimson Cliff appeared above him like a promise of victory. Jake could see the flat stone platform that marked the end of the impossible climb, the goal that had defeated so many before him. The vines grew thick and strong here, as if celebrating their success and guiding another climber to safety. With careful, deliberate movements, Jake pulled himself over the final edge and stood on the summit of the Crimson Cliff. 3,000 feet below, the rocky plain looked like a distant memory. The alien base camps were tiny dots in the vast landscape, and the human camp looked like a small oasis of determination and ingenuity. Jake activated his radio and spoke the words that would echo across the galaxy. "Amy, Tom, this is Jake. I'm standing on the summit." The vine rope system worked perfectly. "We did it." The cheers from his teammates crackled through the radio as Jake looked out over the vast landscape of Kithara. In the distance, he could see alien ships returning to witness his triumph, drawn by the impossible news that a human had conquered the unconquerable cliff below him. His vine rope system stretched down the cliff face like a green thread of victory. The ropes swayed gently in the wind, their hollow stems singing a song of success. They had guided him safely up the mountain, sharing secrets learned over thousands of years of patient adaptation. The HFY was the first alien to speak when Jake reached the ground hours later. The massive Gorvani warrior approached with obvious respect, his forearms spread in a gesture of honor. "Human Jake Morrison, you have shown us something we had forgotten. Strength is not always about power. Sometimes it is about understanding." The Zirathi scientist who had studied Jake's climb stepped forward, its crystalline form sparkling with newfound respect. "We have analyzed your methods extensively. Your success came not from superior technology, but from superior wisdom. You listened to the mountain instead of trying to defeat it." The news of Jake's victory spread throughout the galaxy like wildfire. The story became a legend told on countless worlds, a tale of how a primitive species had succeeded where advanced civilizations failed. But for those who understood the real lesson, it was about more than just climbing a cliff. Jake Morrison had shown the galaxy that the most sophisticated solution was not always the most advanced one, sometimes the best. Answer was the one that worked in harmony with the natural world, understanding its rhythms and respecting its wisdom. The human approach of patience, observation, and cooperation with natural systems had proven more powerful than any technology. As Jake looked up at the stars that night, he knew that humanity's greatest adventures lay not in conquering the galaxy, but in understanding it. The vines had taught him that lesson, and he would carry it with him to whatever challenges awaited among the distant stars. Image. Description for Leonardo AI. A triumphant scene showing a human figure in blue uniform, standing victoriously on the summit of the massive red cliff, arms raised against a purple alien sky with distant stars becoming visible. Below him stretches an intricate network of green vine ropes zigzagging down the entire 3,000-foot cliff face, showing the successful climbing route. At the cliff base, tiny alien figures point upward in amazement while alien spacecraft return to witness the impossible achievement. The human base camp shows two people celebrating with radio equipment,